They told Elijah Carter to leave. They said it to his face, out loud, in front of a packed town hall in Elmswood, Georgia. A dusty little town, stuck between forgotten railroad tracks and soybean fields. But what they didn't know, what not a single soul in that room could imagine, was that Elijah Carter, the quiet black farmer with cracked hands and old boots, would become the man who saved them all. "I don't want to see your face here again," snarled Mayor Jennings, slamming his gavel so hard the room jumped. His mustache quivered with rage. "You brought nothing but trouble to this town." Elijah stood calmly, his posture straight, his hat in hand. He scanned the room, faces twisted in judgment, lips curled in contempt. The stares burned. Some people he'd known since childhood. Others had never spoken a kind word to him. "Trouble," Elijah said, his voice low, steady. "All I've done is plant food and help folks." "Help," scoffed Martha Whitmore from the first row, girls clinging to her like flies to honey. "Your farm smells like manure, and your people bring in outsiders." "You mean the workers?" Elijah raised an eyebrow. "They're just trying to make an honest living like anyone else." Councilman Briggs leaned forward, jabbing a thick finger in the air. "We've had complaints, noise, strangers, trucks in and out at all hours. This ain't Atlanta." "I've been here longer than most of you," Elijah said, eyes now narrowing. "My daddy planted that land before your granddaddy even bought his first tractor. But go on, say it plain. You don't want a black man owning the biggest piece of land in Elmswood." A hush fell over the room. Jennings' face turned a shade darker. "That's enough," he barked. Meeting adjourned. "You have 30 days to vacate." Elijah didn't flinch. He nodded once, then turned and walked out. As he passed the rows of townsfolk, he caught the eye of a young boy, Liam Walker, barely 11, sitting beside his trembling mother. The boy gave him a tiny nod. Elijah returned it. Outside, the sky rumbled. The summer had been dry, too dry. The creeks were low, and the air smelled of dust and heat. Elijah looked toward the horizon. "Storm's coming," he muttered. Back at the farm, Elijah sat on the porch, rubbing his calloused hands. His dog, Buster, lay at his feet, eyes tracking the chickens in the yard, the rows of crops behind the house. Okra, squash, collards, and sweet corn stood proud despite the heat. He'd irrigated by hand, kept the soil rich through ancient methods passed down from his grandfather. It wasn't just a farm. It was legacy. His niece, Tasha, came out holding 2 glasses of sweet tea. "Uncle Eli, you all right?" He took the glass, nodded. "They want us gone." She sat beside him, her face unreadable. "We're not leaving." Elijah looked at her. "They'll come after us." Tasha's jaw tightened. "Let him try." 2 weeks later, the first signs of the crisis appeared. The water tower rusted from the inside and began leaking. By the time anyone noticed, most of the town's supply had vanished. The mayor blamed vandals. The people whispered of sabotage. But Elijah knew better. "It's the drought," he told Tasha. "That old tower's been overworked. Ain't no one bothered to fix it in years." Word spread fast. Crops began failing. Wells dried up. Panic bloomed like rot. Then came the fire. It started in the eastern woods, smoke rising in a thin column before exploding into flames. The wind caught it and tossed it across the dry brush like a lit match in a barn. Within hours, the outer fields of Elmswood were ablaze. Sirens screamed, volunteers scrambled, but the fire was relentless. Elijah stood in his field, watching the inferno crawl closer to the town, and he made a choice. "Tasha," he said, "hook up the tankers. We're going to save them." They didn't see him coming until the black trucks rolled into town like a small army. Elijah's water tankers, lined up and glistening, pulled by battered tractors and driven by the same migrant workers the town had hated. Mayor Jennings stood in front of the church, barking orders when Elijah walked up. "Get those trucks out of here," Jennings shouted. "You're trespassing." Elijah ignored him. He pointed to the hill where the fire crested. "If we don't act now, you'll be standing in ashes. You think you're the hero now? No, sir. I think I'm the only one with water." Jennings blanched. He looked around. His fire trucks had already run dry. The town's only reservoir had been tainted with runoff. I've got 10.00 gallons. Elijah continued. We'll spray the outskirts, protect the main street, but I need your men to coordinate. Jennings clenched his fists. His pride was a stubborn thing. But then little Liam Walker ran up, tears in his eyes. Mayor, my grandma's house, it's right by the trees. Jennings looked down at the boy, then at the fire, then back at Elijah. Fine, he snapped. Do it, for the next 36 hours. Elijah and his crew fought the fire like warriors. Tasha directed the hoses. Migrant workers, black and brown, lined up with buckets and axes. They made fire breaks. They saved homes. They saved lives. The fire roared and hissed, but they held it back. When the last flame flickered out, the town was bruised, but standing, and they owed it all to the man they tried to drive out. A week later, the town hall held another meeting. This time, it was standing room only. Elijah walked in, again, with his hat in hand, but now every eye turned toward him with something new. Respect. Mayor Jennings cleared his throat. We owe you an apology. Elijah raised an eyebrow. Do you mean it? Jennings swallowed hard. I do. Martha Whitmore, the same woman who'd called him trouble, stood. Your crops, your people, you saved my son's house. Didn't do it for praise, Elijah said. Did it because we all live here. Fire don't care what color your skin is. Councilman Briggs shifted in his seat. We'd like to propose a donation to help expand your irrigation system. Make sure we're ready next time. Elijah smiled faintly. I'd accept that. Long as you stop pretending I don't belong. Jennings looked around. Then slowly, he extended a hand. You belong, Mr. Carter. Elijah took it firmly. The town erupted in applause. And outside, under the same Georgia sun that had once scorched the land dry, rain began to fall. The rain came like a whispered blessing, soft at first, then steady, drenching the dry earth in slow, forgiving waves. Thunder rolled far in the distance. No longer a threat, but a promise of healing. The people of Elmswood stood in silence beneath the gray sky as the first drops fell on the scorched soil, on the soot-covered roofs, on their outstretched hands. Elijah stepped outside the town hall and looked up. Rain streaked down his weathered face, blending with sweat and ash. Behind him, Tasha joined him, her expression unreadable, her eyes rimmed with quiet tears. You did it, Uncle Eli, she said, voice trembling. You saved them all. He shook his head slowly. No, he murmured. We saved each other, even if they don't know it yet. Suddenly, little Liam Walker came running across the street, rain splashing around his small sneakers. Mr. Carter, he cried. Mr. Carter. Elijah knelt as Liam launched into his arms. The boy hugged him tight, without hesitation or fear, like he'd known all along who Elijah really was. My grandma said you were like a soldier in a war. Liam whispered into his shoulder. Is that true? Elijah smiled. Maybe. But we didn't fight people, Liam. We fought fire and fear. Did we win? Elijah looked up at the sky again. For now, news traveled fast. Within days, the story of Elmswood's fire and its unexpected hero reached beyond Georgia. A local reporter from Macon arrived, followed by a crew from Atlanta. CNN called. Then the governor's office. One afternoon, a black SUV pulled into Carter Farms. A man in a Navy suit stepped out, holding a folder under his arm. He approached Elijah with purpose. Mr. Elijah Carter. That's me. I'm with the State Agricultural Commission. The governor asked me to personally deliver this. He handed Elijah the folder. Inside was a grant, federal funds designated for sustainable farming and emergency resource development, a six-figure sum, and beneath that, a formal letter of commendation. Your actions didn't just save Elmswood, the man said. They set a precedent. Elijah blinked at the words. I'm just a farmer, the man smiled. Not anymore. With the funds, Elijah didn't buy new trucks or flashy equipment. Instead, he expanded the well system and built a massive underground reservoir. He invested in solar-powered irrigation, community gardens, and free agricultural workshops. But most importantly, he opened Carter Farms to everyone. One sunny morning, a group of school children arrived, black, white, brown, guided by Elijah himself through rows of corn and lettuce. You see this soil, he told them, crouching low. This is where life starts. It don't matter where you come from. If you treat it right, it'll feed you. A little girl raised her hand. Did the town really try to make you leave? Elijah paused, then nodded. They did. Why? He sighed. Because sometimes people fear what they don't understand, but that doesn't mean we stop growing. Not in the soil, not in the soul. Not everyone came around right away. Martha Whitmore still pursed her lips when she passed Elijah in the grocery store. Jennings still carried pride like armor, but change comes slow, like spring after a hard frost. One evening, during the annual Elmswood Harvest Festival, Elijah stood off to the side, watching the town celebrate. Children danced in the square. Families sampled pies and roasted corn from a booth Tasha had set up. "Mind if I stand here?" a voice asked behind him. Elijah turned. It was Jennings, holding 2 lemonades. He offered one. "I don't drink with politicians," Elijah muttered, but took the glass anyway. Jennings chuckled. "Fair, but I'm here as a neighbor." They watched as Liam led a group of kids on a scavenger hunt around the festival. "I know I can't erase what I said," Jennings began. "Or what I didn't do when I should have." Elijah didn't respond. "But I want you to know," Jennings continued, "you made me see things differently. Made a lot of us see things differently." Elijah glanced over. "You mean now that your house didn't burn?" Jennings exhaled. "Maybe that's what it took. But you didn't have to save us. You could have let it all burn." "I thought about it," Elijah admitted, "but then I thought about the kids. Liam, the soil, and the truth." Jennings furrowed his brow. "What truth?" "That this town is mine, too." Jennings looked down. Then, slowly, he nodded. "You're right." For the first time, they stood together, not as enemies, not as rivals, but as men who understood the land, had no use for hate. In the months that followed, Elmswood changed. Slowly, subtly, but undeniably. More black families moved in. Tasha was invited to speak at the high school's career day. The local library added books about agriculture, civil rights, and local black history. Elijah didn't seek the spotlight, but it found him anyway. Universities called. Documentarians visited. Oprah's team left a handwritten letter. But Elijah still woke up before dawn, still fed the chickens, still walked the rows with Buster at his side. One crisp autumn day, he found a young man barely 20 waiting by the edge of the field. "You, Elijah Carter?" "I am." The man took off his cap. "Name's Darnell. My father told me you used to work with his uncle. He passed last year, but he always said if I ever wanted to learn farming the right way, I should come find you." Elijah studied him a moment. "You know how to work?" "Yes, sir." "You willing to learn what this land really means?" "Yes, sir." Elijah nodded toward the barn. "Then grab a shovel. Let's see what you're made of." The next fire never came, but when a flood hit the next county, Elijah organized a convoy of aid. When a chemical spill threatened the creek, he coordinated a cleanup before the EPA even responded. He became more than a farmer. He became the heart of Elmswood. And when a new town sign was installed, white paint, fresh letters, it read, "Welcome to Elmswood, home of heroes, soil, and second chances." At the bottom, carved into the wood by a local artist, were the words, "Dedicated to Elijah Carter, the man who stayed." Years passed, but Elijah Carter remained the same in spirit, steady as a rooted oak, quiet but ever watching, working the land with the same worn hands that had once been told to leave. But now, every hand that shook his did so with respect. Every child who passed by his farm pointed in awe, whispering stories of the fire, of the water trucks, of the man who never turned his back on the very people who had once turned theirs on him. But one day, something unexpected arrived at Carter Farms. Not fire, not drought, not reporters or politicians. It was a letter. Tasha opened the mailbox like any other morning, her hair in a scarf, her hoodie speckled with cornmeal from breakfast prep. She saw the seal, presidential, golden, unmistakable. "Uncle Eli," she called, walking briskly toward the porch. "You need to see this." He was already sitting there, sharpening an old hoe with steady rhythm, Buster dozing at his feet. He looked up as she handed him the envelope. Slowly, he opened it. The President of the United States was inviting him to Washington, D.C. The letter detailed a national award for civic bravery and rural leadership, a televised ceremony, a speech, a seat at the National Agricultural Council, his name carved in stone beside others who'd changed the course of communities: farmers, soldiers, teachers, heroes. Tasha leaned forward. "You gonna go?" Elijah stared at the letter. "Never thought they'd want someone like me in a place like that." "That's the thing," she said. "It's not about what they wanted. It's about what you made impossible to ignore." He smiled faintly. "Then I reckon it's time to put on that old suit." The train ride to D.C. was quiet, the fields giving way to cities, the open skies replaced by steel and glass. Elijah sat beside the window, wearing a gray suit he hadn't touched in years. His boots were polished, his hands clean, but the calluses still showed. Tasha sat beside him, snapping photos and live tweeting everything. "You know, half the country's gonna know your story by the time we hit Virginia," she said. He chuckled. "I'm not sure they'll care." "They will. You're what they need to hear. Especially now." The ceremony was held at the Lincoln Memorial, packed with officials, press, and community leaders. Elijah stood on stage, flanked by the president, national farmers associations, and mayors from all over the country. The moment he stepped up to the podium, there was silence. Cameras flashed. Then he spoke. "I never wanted to be known," he began. "I just wanted to work my land, feed my family, treat people right. But sometimes life gives you a choice, to walk away or to stand your ground." He paused, his voice calm, deep, resonant. "I was told to leave, not politely, not quietly, but I stayed. Not because I was trying to prove a point, but because I knew that soil. I knew what it could do. I knew what we all could do, together." He looked out over the crowd. Farming ain't just about crops. It's about legacy. It's about planting seeds in soil and in people, seeds of change, seeds of courage, even when it ain't easy, especially then. The audience stood, applauded, some cried. Tasha recorded the whole thing, tears streaking her cheeks. Back in Elmswood, the entire town had gathered at the community center to watch the ceremony live on a projector. Liam, now a teenager, led the cheers when Elijah finished. Mayor Jennings sat in the back row, pride and shame mingling in his eyes. He whispered to the woman beside him, "He's everything I wasn't smart enough to see back then." When Elijah returned home, the town lined the streets. Banners read, "Welcome home, hero." The same people who once scowled now smiled and waved. Some wept openly. Elijah shook hands, hugged children, and walked slowly to the steps of his farmhouse. He turned to face the crowd. "I didn't do it alone," he said. "None of this happens without all of you, even the hard times, especially the hard times." Someone in the crowd yelled, "Speech!" Elijah laughed. "YALL already heard me talk more than I've done in 10 years. Laughter rolled through the crowd. But then he grew serious. "There's still work to do," he said. "People in towns like ours, all across this country, are still being judged for who they are instead of what they do. We gotta change that. Not with shouting, with doing, with showing up, with staying. Even when they tell you to leave." The crowd clapped again, longer this time. Afterward, Elijah walked back to the barn. The sun was low, golden. Buster trailed him faithfully. He picked up a shovel, ran his fingers along the handle. "What now?" Tasha asked, leaning against the gate. He looked over the fields. "Now we plant again. After all that, you're going right back to it." He smiled. "That's what farmers do." Years later, a new museum opened in Elmswood, the Carter Center for Agricultural Resilience. It wasn't fancy, but it had everything: farming tools, video interviews, photos of the fire and its aftermath. A whole section was dedicated to Elijah's boots and hat, displayed behind glass. Kids came from all over to visit. They listened to recordings of Elijah's speech, walked through mock-ups of his farm, even helped water a community garden outside the museum. One day, a young black boy stood staring at Elijah's portrait. He tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Can I be like him?" His mother nodded. "You already are, baby. You already are." And Elijah. He never stopped. He worked the land until his body told him it was time to slow down. He passed the daily operations to Tasha and Darnell, now co-owners of Carter Farms, but still woke at dawn, still walked the fields, still greeted every sunrise like it was the first. When he passed quietly in his sleep at 87, the entire state mourned. His funeral was held under an open sky, with soil in everyone's hands instead of flowers. Tasha stood before the crowd, holding his worn hat. "He wasn't just a man who stayed," she said, voice breaking. "He was the root, and because of him, we all grew." As the crowd lowered soil into the earth, the clouds parted and the sun, warm and steady, lit the land he had once been told to leave, but never did, because Elijah Carter was never just a farmer. He was the man who saved the entire town. A season passed, then another. But the memory of Elijah Carter refused to fade. Carter Farms remained alive, more vibrant than ever. The fields bore witness to something deeper than crops' heritage, healing, and the story of one man's refusal to give up when the world turned its back. Tasha and Darnell, now both in their 30s, ran the farm with the same integrity Elijah had taught them: respect the island, honor the people, and lead by example, not noise, on what would have been Elijah's 89th birthday. Tasha stood beside the wooden sign at the entrance to the farm. It now read, "Carter Farms, Est, 1953, Land of Legacy." A bronze statue of Elijah had been erected nearby, not large or boastful, just tall enough to meet the gaze of those passing by. He stood in the pose everyone remembered, hat in hand, boots in soil, head high. That morning, buses arrived from Atlanta, Macon, even Savannah. Children spilled out, holding notebooks and cameras. Journalists stood by with mics. And at the heart of it all, a new initiative was about to launch: the Elijah Carter Youth Agricultural Fellowship. Tasha stepped up to the microphone beneath the same tree Elijah once napped under after long days in the sun. "When I was a girl," she began, "this farm was the only place that felt like home. Not just because it fed us, but because it taught us. My uncle, he didn't teach me how to farm. He taught me how to stay. When the world tells you to go, when they slam the door, when they write you off, he taught me to stay. With dignity, with grace, and with work." She looked out over the young faces in the crowd. "This fellowship is for every kid who's ever been underestimated. For every young person told they don't belong. You do." Elijah Carter proved it. Thunderous applause followed. But Tasha stepped down quietly, tears in her eyes. Darnell walked up beside her and handed her a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" she asked. "It was in his Bible," Darnell said. "Found it last night. Thought you should read it today." Tasha unfolded it. Elijah's handwriting, crooked but firm, stared back at her. It wasn't long. Just a simple note. "If they tell you to leave, remember who you are. Stay. And grow something so big they can't ignore it. The soil don't care what name you carry, only how deep your roots go." Elijah. Tasha pressed the note to her heart, then looked up at the sky. A single hawk soared above, wings stretched wide, gliding over the fields Elijah once walked. That summer, the first group of fellowship students arrived. They learned how to till, how to compost, how to care. But more than that, they learned Elijah's story. Not just the fire, but the man behind it. The quiet sacrifices, the strength in silence, the power in persistence. One of those students, a girl named Amina, only 12 years old, wrote a speech at the end of her program. Elijah Carter didn't fight with fists or protests. He fought with water, with patience. He saved a town that didn't want him, and because of that, I believe I can save something too. Maybe not a town, but maybe a kid like me. Her words were printed in the state newspaper, shared by millions, and suddenly Elijah's legacy stretched further than the county line, further than Georgia, reaching small towns in Texas, cornfields in Nebraska, even villages in West Africa. Years later, long after Carter Farms had become a symbol of national pride, an elderly Liam Walker returned to Elmswood. He was now a teacher, bringing a group of students from New York for a visit. He hadn't been back since his teens. As he stepped off the bus, he touched the edge of Elijah's statue. His voice caught in his throat. "This man," he told the kids, "once saved my grandmother's house when I was too small to help. I watched him fight fire, and he didn't do it with hoses. He did it with heart." The children listened quietly. Then one asked, why did they want him to leave? Liam hesitated. Because they didn't see his worth. Because sometimes people fear what they don't understand. But he made them understand. A girl raised her hand. What happened to those people who didn't like him? Liam smiled gently. Some of them changed, some didn't. But the town changed forever. Eventually, the Carter name found its way into school books, not just for agriculture, but for courage, for leadership. Elijah Carter became a case study at Harvard. His story was made into a documentary narrated by Denzel Washington. Tasha was invited to speak at international panels on food justice and equity, and each time she spoke, she told them the same thing. He never asked to be a hero. He just refused to leave. And even as cities grew, even as time moved on, tourists continued to arrive in Elmswood to see the fields, the old porch, the tankers preserved in a glass barn, to stand where Elijah stood and feel, for a moment, the weight of dignity. In the final scene of a future film, one that would win awards and move audiences around the world, a lone figure walks across golden fields at sunset. A young farmer, skin dark and shining with sweat, stops in the middle of the rows. She kneels, plants a single seed, presses it gently into the soil, and then, looking up, the camera catches her face. It's Amina, grown now, strong, unshakable, and behind her, a weathered plaque in the distance reads, "Stay, grow, remember who you are, Elijah Carter." The screen fades to black, but in the hearts of those who watched, who listened, who remembered, the story of the man they told to leave, but who saved them all, never ends. The story carried on not just through headlines or textbooks, but through the people who chose to live differently because of Elijah Carter. Back in Elmswood, Carter Farms became more than a landmark. It became a way of life. Families gathered every Saturday for open market days under the old pecan tree. Musicians played blues on the porch. Children painted murals of cornfields and fire trucks on the barn walls. Veterans found work there, so did single mothers, so did ex-cons, runaways, and dreamers. Because here, labels didn't matter. Only the soil did. Tasha and Darnell, now married, built a new school next to the fields. Not a fancy building, but one with classrooms lit by sunlight and cooled by fans made from old tractor parts. They called it the Carter School for Resilience. Every student, before graduation, was required to grow something from seed to fruit. Failure to harvest. Tomatoes, peppers, wildflowers, even peaches. One year, a troubled boy named Malik came to the school. He was angry, quiet. His mother worked 2 jobs. His father was gone. He hated the dirt, hated the bugs, didn't speak to anyone. Then Tasha gave him a packet of okra seeds. "Why these?" he asked, frowning. "Because they're stubborn," she replied with a grin. "Like you." He scowled, but planted them anyway. Weeks passed. At first, nothing grew. Malik cursed them, kicked the rows, told everyone it was pointless. But Tasha never stopped checking in. One morning, he arrived to find tiny green shoots pushing through the earth. He dropped to his knees, touched them with shaking fingers. and wept. He passed that year with honors, gave the graduation speech. He later became a counselor at the school and started a youth program in Atlanta. But when asked what changed him, he always answered with one name: Elijah Carter. Meanwhile, the outside world changed too. The agricultural industry began studying the Carter method, Elijah's holistic approach to farming that included heritage techniques, environmental balance, and emotional education. A new generation of black farmers emerged, citing Carter farms as their inspiration. One of them, Andre Richmond, testified before Congress. Elijah Carter wasn't just a farmer, he said. He was proof that the land remembers who loves it, and the people do, too. Laws changed. Funding increased. Programs for rural youth tripled. And in a moment few ever expected, the president, 10 years after Elijah's passing, declared August 14th, Elijah's birthday, as National Community Roots Day, a holiday to honor local heroes who transform hate into healing. But for all the fame, for all the reverence, it was the quiet moments that meant the most. Like the night Tasha and Darnell sat by the fire pit behind the farmhouse. Their two daughters, little Evie and Simone, roasted marshmallows nearby. "You think he'd be proud?" Darnell asked softly. Tasha didn't answer right away. She looked out at the fields lit silver under the moon, the wind rustling like whispers from the past. I think he already was," she said. "Every time he saw a new seed planted, a new kid walked through that gate, every time someone stayed when it would have been easier to run." She turned to her daughters. "Girls," she called, "come here a second." They skipped over, giggling. "Sticky with sugar. Do you know whose farm this is?" she asked. "Great Uncle Elijah's," they shouted in unison. "And do you know what he taught us?" Evie piped up. "To stay," Simone added. "And to grow." Darnell chuckled. "They've been listening. They always are," Tasha said, "whether we think they are or not." The legacy even reached places Elijah had never seen. In Ghana, a cooperative was founded in his name to train women in sustainable farming. In Brazil, a youth ranch bore his initials in carved stone. In India, a farmer with no formal education painted Elijah's face on a mural beside Gandhi and Mandela. And at every Carter Fellowship graduation around the world, the ceremony ended with the same quote etched on the wall behind the podium: "Stay, grow. Remember who you are, Elijah Carter." It became more than a motto. It became a movement. Decades later, a time capsule was buried on Carter Farms. Inside it were Elijah's hat, his old pocket knife, the original grant letter from the governor, and a faded Polaroid of him holding a baby goat and smiling with a gap in his teeth. The capsule was marked "Open in 100 years," and above it, engraved into a steel plaque, "Here stood a man who was told to leave, but he stayed. And because he did, the world learned how to grow. The soil still breathes in Elmswood. The sun still rises over those fields. And every footstep on Carter Farms echoes the quiet strength of a man who never raised his voice, only his hands, his crops, and a community." Elijah Carter didn't just save a town, he built a future, and the roots he planted, they've stretched around the world.